In Linux, the root user is the super user. It's just like administrator in Windows. It has the privileges to do anything on the system. And this is important for you to recognize because as a super user, issuing the wrong command could cause a great deal of damage and you'll end up seriously messing your system up. So be careful when issuing commands as root. Usually, you don't want to be running as root because anything that gets executed in your system will be executed as root, which means it will have access to anything it wants. Say, for example, you accidentally download a virus or a malware and you run it by accident. If you run it as root, that means the virus or the malware will get root privileges. So the virus, when it runs, it will run as root. It will have unlimited, unrestricted access to anything in your system. While on the other hand, if you are logged in as a regular user and you do not have super admin powers and you run that virus or that malware might actually break and it might not be able to work because it does not have access to files and folders that it needs access to. The other problem is if you are running something as root and it gets compromised. Let's say you are a web administrator. You're running a web server, you're hosting a website, and that web server is running as root. Then comes an evil bad hacker along the way and breaks into your web server. They would immediately have root access because your web server and your web service are running as root. And you don't want that. This is why Linux systems, including Kali, have moved away from allowing the root user by default. A few years ago, when you set up your Linux system, you would have the option to log in as the root user by default. This no longer is an option. This is why here you see that my username is not root. Now you might be wondering, what if I have my own Linux and I want to run as root? It's my Linux, I want to break it. Shouldn't this be possible? Yes, of course it's possible. Let's say I'm running this command. You'll understand what this does later on in the course, so don't worry about that. Let's focus on what happens. See that error message here? So what's the solution? I can do one of two things, but they both involve the usage of a command called sudo. Sudo is short for super user do. When I precede any command with the sudo, that command will run with super user privileges. So now if I do sudo before that command, I'm gonna get asked to enter my password. I type my password, not the root password, because I do not know what the root password is. I know my password, so I'm going to type my password, and here we go, it works. The other way of doing this, if you are a little bit lazy, is doing sudo su. Notice now that my prompt changed. So what I'm doing effectively is I'm telling my Linux to super user do, so make me a super user. I have changed now into the root user. The root user's prompt looks like the hashtag, whereas the regular user prompt has the $sign. And I can actually verify this. I can type the ID command, and this shows me what user I'm running as right now. You can see it's root. This is not recommended practice, like I already said. Now to exit the root prompt, you type exit.